From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now with Steve Sebelius and Patrick Walker.
The state of Nevada is shaken with a pretty big surprise Tuesday when State Senate Majority Leader Kelvin Atkinson resigned his seat, saying he will plead guilty to spending his campaign funds for personal use. I'm Patrick Walker.
And I'm Steve Sebelius. The longtime Nevada lawmaker stepped down in a tearful speech on the Senate floor.
As I rise in this body, for what will be my final time, it is with great sadness I am announcing my resignation from the State Senate and this legislative body. Regretfully, it has been discovered that I have used campaign funds for personal use. Thus, I will be taking full responsibility for that and will be pleading guilty for those actions when the time comes.
Kelvin Atkinson served in Carson City for 17 years, ending up this session as the leader of the Senate's Democrats. That all came to an end after he confessed to taking campaign funds for personal use and told his colleagues his time in Carson City was over. Atkinson represented North Las Vegas in the Nevada Assembly for 10 years before being elected to the state Senate, first in 2012. He was re-elected in 2016 and won both races handily. Atkinson was also a national leader, serving in 2015 as the vice chairman of the Council of State Governments. Fellow Democrats greeted Atkinson's announcement with disdain. Everyone from Governor Steve Sisolak to Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall, Assembly Speaker Jason Frierson, the Senate Democratic Caucus, and even the liberal group Battleborn Progress all used the word disappointed to describe Atkinson's crimes. Republicans went further. Senate Minority Leader James Settlemeyer of Minden said Atkinson had violated the integrity of Nevada's elections, adding, quote, "We must get all of the facts and determine how far this corruption goes," unquote. Another factor, Democrats angry because they believe Atkinson knew about the investigation when he ran for leader this year, but sought election anyway, despite the real possibility he'd have to later resign. That anger may not have been mollified by Atkinson's tearful apology at the end of his remarks on Tuesday morning.
In closing, to my family, to my friends, to my colleagues who put their faith and trust in me, to my constituents and to my supporters, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed, and I'm truly, truly sorry. I pray for your forgiveness. Thank you, Madam President.
The Senate Democratic Caucus unanimously selected Senator Nicole Cannizzaro of Las Vegas as their new leader. Senator Julia Ratty will be the new Assistant Majority Leader, and Ivana Cancella will take over Ratty's position as Co-Majority Whip.
The Clark County Commission will appoint Atkinson's replacement in the Senate in the coming days. Among the choices, Assemblywoman Dina Neal, who's the daughter of legendary former state Senator Joe Neal. The deadline for filing an application to be considered for that state Senate seat is Monday the 11th at noon. Well, also, Las Vegas City Councilman Steve Seroka has resigned, that effective immediately. He was elected to represent Ward 2 in June of 2017. So what comes next for that seat? Seroka resigned in a letter to the city clerk. He had just been elected, as we mentioned, not long before that, back in 2017. Late last year, a recall effort was started against Seroka over how he dealt with the city's long-running dispute with developers interested in the Badlands golf course. Although there's been a recall effort over the Badlands, there's no indication that played a role in his resignation. What happens next for that seat is now in the hands of the City Council. Within the next 30 days, it will decide whether to call a special election or appoint someone to fill the rest of that term, which ends in 2021. That decision will be on the agenda at the March 20th City Council meeting. The last vacancy in the city occurred when former Councilman Ricky Barlow resigned in January of 2018 after admitting to getting campaign cash kickbacks from vendors. That vacancy was filled with a special election, which Councilman Cedric Creer won. Now, Seroka did not say why he resigned, and that the city of Las Vegas also has refused to comment on it. So, Steve, I want to ask this. Does the city owe constituents some kind of an explanation?
Well, at least two online outlets, the Nevada Independent and the Nevada Current, reported there was a human resources complaint that had been filed against Seroka, but neither the city nor Councilman Seroka said anything publicly. And I think it's completely reasonable for the people who live in his ward, who just recently elected him, to want their questions to be answered about why he's no longer there.
Yeah, we'll continue to press and see if we can get any answers.
Well, the controversy continues weeks after Governor Sisolak signed a bill requiring background checks on nearly all private party gun sales.
Yeah, Nye County's sheriff said on Thursday that she will not enforce the law when it takes effect in January of next year. She is now the 4th county sheriff in Nevada to say no so far. Nye County Sheriff Sharon Worley making a statement in a letter to Governor Steve Sisolak. Quote, as sheriff of Nye County, I agree with Sheriff Watts. I will not participate in the enforcement of this new law, end quote. Worley joins the sheriffs of White Pine, Pershing, and Eureka counties, saying the new background check law creates a burden on law enforcement and that citizens don't want it.
And vote no on question 1.
Rural sheriffs didn't either, as seen in this ad from the NRA in 2016. Statewide that year it passed by less than a percentage point. 16 of 17 counties voted it down, but it won by a big enough margin in Clark County to carry the measure to a statewide victory. Republican Attorney General Adam Laxalt put the law on hold because it required the FBI to perform the background checks, something the federal agency refused to do. Last month, lawmakers rewrote the bill, instead requiring the state to perform the background checks, leading to 2 days of tense testimony.
It's time to get serious about gun violence. It's time to enact the measure that Nevadans voted for.
Prohibited persons do not subject themselves to background checks. This law will not change that.
One supporter who helped with the effort to pass the measure reacted to the sheriff's letter during a taping of Politics Now. Your reaction to that?
I think that's hilarious. And they're going to enforce it eventually. We'll take it to the courts, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's going to get enforced whether they like it or not.
Both Governor Sisolak and Attorney General Aaron Ford responded to the letter, saying they look forward to working with sheriffs to review ways to enforce this law. Well, we had some follow-up questions and reach out to the Nye County Sheriff's Office for a follow-up interview with Sheriff Worley, but our calls so far have gone unreturned. Well, this is a story I broke yesterday on 8 News Now. Marijuana dispensary owners are fighting back against a licensing process they say is too shadowy and secret. Attorney and former Secretary of State Ross Miller plans on filing a motion as part of an ongoing lawsuit Monday on behalf of 11 clients. Miller says he also plans on asking a judge to stop the state's licensing process until it can get some more sunlight. Among their concerns is that the concentration of licenses is to a small group of people. Also, they're concerned that people who were denied licenses just can't get an answer from the state as to why. I filed similar public records requests with the state previously. I was also denied that information. This topic was scheduled for the Nevada State Tax Commission meeting Monday, but that meeting has been canceled.
Wynn Resorts has already paid its record-setting $20 million fine. That's according to the Nevada Gaming Control Board.
The casino giant was fined after failing to investigate sexual harassment allegations against former CEO Steve Wynn. Wynn Resort says it fired those involved in the covering up those allegations. The money paid will go into the state's general fund. Well, the First Lady was in Las Vegas.
The United States Postal Service has strengthened its inspections of packages coming into our country.
The policies Melania Trump talked about during an opioid town hall in Las Vegas this week. That's coming.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Well, First Lady Melania Trump was in Las Vegas this week promoting her Be Best initiative.
She participated in a town hall over at the Westgate that focused on the opioid crisis. For some Las Vegas residents, Tuesday's town hall on opioids was a chance to hear about a topic very near to them.
I just see mothers torn apart and children children are really suffering right now.
With this crisis, I think it's a good opportunity for our community to be talking about this because it definitely affects us big time.
First Lady Melania Trump gave a brief update on the administration's efforts to combat opioid abuse in the United States. She touts $1.4 billion in grants for drug prevention and treatment and $50 million for police programs that focus on drug intervention for helping different authorities make a dent in the crisis. That includes agencies like the Postal Service, which is looking at fentanyl coming in from China.
The United States Postal Service has strengthened its inspections of packages coming into our country.
Mrs. Trump also talked about how important it is for parents to speak with their children about drugs.
I teach him, I try to explain how drugs are dangerous and it will mess up your head, it will mess up your body.
The DEA's acting administrator also spoke, making the case for a barrier on the U.S.-Mexico border.
From DEA's perspective, every barrier we can put up along the southwest border where most drugs come from will stop drug traffickers or slow drug traffickers down.
Whatever the solution may be, the audience today is hopeful for the future.
I know change is on the rise. I feel it, I see it every day, I work in the recovery community, I'm telling you it's working.
Well, this was the third stop for the First Lady on a two-day, three-city tour in support of that Be Best initiative. Well, are voters who signed a petition to recall an elected official allowed to change their minds and sign another document asking it to strike their names from the recall?
That issue came before the Nevada Supreme Court on Monday. Attorneys argued over the stalled recalls targeting State Senators Joyce Woodhouse and Nicole Cannizzaro. The so-called strike requests were created by the legislature. They're not mentioned in the Constitution. In this case, a sampling of 5% of the signatures initially showed both petitions were valid and could trigger special elections. But questions about the validity of signatures and the number of valid strike requests led a Clark County judge to order that every single signature on each petition be reviewed. Now, that review showed neither petition hit the mark. But recall lawyer Michael Wall argued that full review should never have happened. Wall also argued that there were errors in the full review of signatures and that at least one of the petitions, the one targeting Woodhouse, might have had enough valid signatures to trigger an election. But he maintained that once the petitions were submitted and the sample showed enough valid signatures, an election should have been held regardless of any other consideration. That sparked questions from at least two of the other justices and brought a response from Woodhouse's attorney, Mark Elias. The court won't rule on the case for some time, and even then, we may not get an answer because the lower court found there weren't enough signatures in the first place. Justices may dismiss the case on those grounds and leave the issue of strike requests for another day.
The state needs to upgrade their bandwidth. That looked like 56K dial up there. Well, enforcing gun background checks.
This is taking a stand. It's their last stand, frankly.
Our Faceoff panel takes on rural sheriffs saying they're not going to enforce the law. That's next on Politics Now.
And Clark County officials are raising alarm bells over a bill favored by Nevada's Democrats, same-day voter registration. The problems they have with the legislation, that's next. Well, we told you earlier in the show about the Nye County Sheriff saying she would not enforce Nevada's new background check law. So we put that question to our Faceoff panel. Here's KXNT radio host Alan Stock from the right and Battleborn Progress Executive Director Annette Magnus from the left.
On Thursday, the Nye County Sheriff Sharon Worley joined a couple of other northern Nevada sheriffs who have now sent letters to Governor Sisolak essentially saying we're not going to be enforcing the background check law. So I think simply your reaction to that?
I think that's hilarious. And they're going to enforce it eventually. We'll take it to the courts, that's fine. But at the end of the day, it's going to get enforced whether they like it or not. And this is just more steps for them to delay the inevitable that we're going to have background checks in this state. It passed this by the people. Now it passed the legislature and was signed into law by the governor. And it's going to become the law. And so they can put all the letters out there. They can do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, this is the law now. And they're going to be required to enforce it.
They can put out letters and be defiant for a while, at least, because the law won't take effect for another couple of years, well, another year and a half or so before it actually takes effect. But that being said, it's actively saying we're not going to enforce a state law. What do you think, and can they do that?
Well, first of all, I'm not a big fan of that state law in the first place, but I'm also consistent in another area. I don't believe that that entities, governmental entities on a lower level should be ignoring what the entities above them have said. The issue of, let's say, sanctuary city, sanctuary state. If we're not a sanctuary state here in the state of Nevada, and all of a sudden, if Nye County or Clark County or one of the counties said, we're going to become a sanctuary state in spite of what the state, we're going to become a sanctuary county in spite of what the state said, if that happened, I would be opposed to that. I mean, you know, if the state passes a law, you don't like it, then you fight it, you try to change it. I don't blame her for saying that on one level. On the other level, again, when the state has passed this law, you better figure a way to try to work with the state on something like this and not just go against it, because that could happen in other areas like sanctuary issues and everything like that. We've got to be consistent, that's all.
You see this more of just taking a stand, just putting out there, this is how I feel.
Exactly. This is taking a stand. It's their last stand, frankly. And at the end of the day, elections have consequences. We've talked about that on here. The Democrats won. The Democrats passed this bill. The Democratic governor signed the bill. And now it's the state law. You don't get to pick and choose which laws you're going to enforce just because of the person who's sitting in the governor's office.
We can also watch Alan and Annette discuss Kelvin Atkinson and Steve Seroka's sudden resignations and the battle over anti-Semitism in Congress. That's on LasVegasNow.com. Go to political news under the news tab. Patrick?
Well, Steve, they didn't call me on the date being wrong, of course, for the background check bill. That is January 2nd of 2020. Hey, this is Ion Carson City, where we tell you about some of the other things that are going on up at the legislature. A bill to codify protection for patients with pre-existing conditions in a Nevada law. Well, that had its first hearing on Wednesday. SB 235 is sponsored by Democratic State Senator Julia Ratty. A lot of healthcare groups testified in favor of the bill. No one testified neutral or in opposition. Well, the first hearing was held on a bill that would toughen penalties on some domestic violence offenders. That's SB 218. A first offense right now can get 2 days to 6 months in jail and a $200 to $1,000 fine. The minimum fine would increase to $400, and they would have to serve the jail time, even if that means that they would be missing work. The minimum time for a second offense would go from a minimum 10 days to 30 days. The minimum fine would jump up from $500 to $750. And a third offense goes from a Category C felony to a Category B felony. It also adds a minimum fine of $1,000. A bill that would allow same-day voter registration met what could be some unexpected opposition from Clark County Registrar of Voters, Joe Gloria. Gloria said that registering and voting on Election Day, if it was allowed, he would have no way to stop people from voting at multiple locations until days after the election, something he called problematic. SB 213 is a long-time progressive goal and sponsored by Democratic State Senator James Orenshaw. He says more than 10,000 voters had turned in registration applications after the deadline in last year's election, including more than 7,000 in Clark County. So, Steve, Gloria showing up to show his concerns. That could really put a halt on this bill, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because he's considered an expert in how to run elections. And the bill also is facing some headwinds, too, because Republicans have raised concerns about voter fraud. And Joe Gloria actually said you can actually vote in multiple places. I guess there's no way for a computer to determine that you voted in one place and prevent you from doing that in others. So those are legitimate concerns that really could stall the bill.
Well, naming an official state element.
I think it is that strong of a component to who we are.
I went out to see if neon is up to the task. Coming up.
For a free consultation.
Well, neon has been an important and storied part of Nevada history, in particular here in Las Vegas. So important that there's a bill that would name neon as the official state element.
AB 182, it's one of the shortest bills I've ever seen. It's just 5 lines long, but supporters say the bill honors neon's vast contribution to our state. For decades, the bright lights of Las Vegas had a signature look. Neon signs washed our city streets and buildings in that signature reddish-orange glow.
My parents, for cheap entertainment on the weekends, would throw us kids in the car, and we would go down Fremont Street and look at the bright lights, and then we would go down the Las Vegas Strip. Sassy Sally's, and for a main reason here, the 2 S's.
Neon Museum CEO Rob McCoy says there's a nostalgia factor for the light and sound emanated from neon signs. And he argues it goes beyond old-time feelings.
And I think you can make a case, actually, that without neon in Las Vegas would not be the city it is today.
So what is neon? Well, let's go inside the lab and find out.
This is helium, and it's the first one below helium.
UNLV physics professor Michael Pravica knows a thing or two about the noble gas with the atomic number 10.
Stable, and people like to use it for all sorts of purposes, in particular neon lamps.
Neon gas trapped in a tube glows reddish-orange when a high-powered transformer pushes electricity through it. After neon, scientists used other gases to produce lights of different colors, like this bluish-purple, which comes from the element krypton. Nikola Tesla gets credit for figuring out the best way to make these tubes light up.
And Tesla developed these transformers, and so when you hear the little hum in the fluorescent lights, that's from his high-voltage amplification.
AB 182 is simply a ceremonial bill, but for supporters, it says we are more than just the Silver State.
I think it is that strong of a component to who we are.
Well, that bill's been introduced in the Assembly. The first hearing is Monday morning, 9 o'clock, in the Government Affairs Committee.
Time now for What to Watch, where we tell you what we're keeping an eye on next week. AB 187 that would require kids to wear helmets. That's in front of the Assembly Judiciary Committee Monday morning. It applies to any child less than 18 using a bike, tricycle, roller skates, scooter, or similar device.
The first violation is a verbal warning, and you get information about free and reduced helmet costs. The second fine is $15.
And there goes your allowance for the week if you get caught.
That's right. Don't get caught without your helmet. Absolutely. And these are dangerous streets, so everybody should wear a helmet. Well, thanks for watching Politics Now. You can email me, Sebelius, LasVegasNow.com.
My email is pwalker@LasVegasNow.com. Stay up to date online and catch us here every Saturday. Have a good one.